Good evening. Again, as we look at the Christmas season, I want to talk tonight about the lights of Christmas. As I go out my front door and look down the street, I see Christmas lights. Numerous houses are lit up in their yards and lights of Christmas. One of my favorite books in the Bible, in fact, my favorite gospel is the Gospel of John. Spent a lot of time studying John's gospel. But there's no birth narrative. There's no story of Christmas in John's gospel. And yet, in the very first chapter, we're introduced to a concept that is so much greater than just the story of the birth of a Savior. As you study the Gospel of John, two words appear. There are more than two, but two especially appear quite frequently. The first one is light, and the second one is life. So I want to read from that very first chapter. It's called the prologue to the Gospel of John. But the first 14 verses of his Gospel talk about light and life. And it has everything to do with Christmas. The lights we'll talk about. So let's read it. John 1 through 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. Here it is now. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. There was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them gave he the right to become the children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of men, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. Glory is the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Interesting, isn't it, how the light shines throughout the Bible itself. The word light appears about 200 times in the New American Standard Version of the Bible. In the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, God spoke light into his existence as his first creative act. Now John gives us here again, in the beginning was the Word, and the light shines in darkness. For 40 years, I quoted the Christmas story from memory in my churches. I begin with words of Isaiah the prophet. Here it is again. The people that walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. And John says, and the light shines in the darkness. You see, there's more to light in the Christmas story than just lights blinking on housetops. Maybe this is John's birth narrative after all. Do you realize how much of the Christmas story is set in darkness? How about his birth in a dark stable? I don't imagine that was a well-lit place at night. How about the shepherds keeping watch in their fields at night? How about the wise men following a star at night? And the light shines in the darkness. Even today, when we celebrate Christmas, we use lights to proclaim it. Several years ago, our home was decorated with over 1,200 lights. Cities and towns have lighting contests for the best lighting. We won that one year in a small town where we lived. Municipalities decorate their streets with lights. Lights and Christmas just seem to go together. And the light shines in the darkness. Yeah, this is John's Christmas story. I want to focus on verse 5 for these insights as we come into this Christmas season. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. There's an author by the name of Hannah Pryor. She gives an interesting connection between light and Christmas. I want to read that for you. I don't think it's on the screen, but let me just read it. The esteemed 18th century Vilma Goen pointed out that the 25th word in the Torah, I could say the 25th word in the Bible, is light. It was on the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev that the Maccabees won the victory that resulted in the miracle of lighting the menorah from which we get the holiday called Hanukkah. The light of God dispensed the paganistic darkness. It was in remembrance of this miracle of the menorah that burned for 8 days on oil that should have only lasted a short time, that Hanukkah was instituted. And we read one time in the New Testament where Jesus celebrated the Feast of Lights. It was there he stood up and said, I am the light of the world. So let's look at light. We'll call it the Christmas light. Think about the resources or what light does, what it's good for. First of all, it gets rid of the darkness. Not so good, it exposes the things hidden in the darkness. Dirt, creatures of the night. Did you ever walk into a room that hadn't been inhabited and turn on the light and the cockroaches run everywhere? Light does away with sin. John chapter 3, skipping a couple chapters, chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and doesn't come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. Sin is dispelled by the light of the world. Light deters crime, for the reason we just mentioned. Many cities are lighting certain areas to get crime down. I remember when we were in Kankakee, Illinois, our church was on the east end. There was an auto dealership there that I understood moved because there was too much vandalism going on, too much crime. But another dealer moved in, and the first thing he did was put up a lot of lights all over the lot. You know what happened? The vandalism dropped tremendously. So the presence of the light of the world in a society or in an individual deters the darkness and can remove the sin. Keeps us from running into things when we're driving at night or walking at night, we could say. You see, darkness and blindness are almost synonyms. You can't see in the dark. Light, the minute you turn on the light, the darkness is gone. It's just gone. So light dispels darkness. The second thing light does, it provides illumination. It keeps us from stumbling. It lights up our activities. How many of you have stubbed your toe while walking through the dark house at night without turning on the lights? Keeps us from running into things while we're driving at night, most of the time anyway. It illuminates our minds. The light of the world illuminates our minds. Did you ever use that expression, oh, I see? You see, you just caught a glimpse of something that was dark from you before that. It provides our illumination to read and study. Spiritual blindness is from failure to walk in the light that we have. If He is the light of the world, and He is, and we walk in the light, we won't be spiritually blind. Look at 1 John, the first letter of John, chapter 1, verse 7. But if we walk in the light, now we're talking about His light now, if we walk in the light as He Himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses from all sin, if we walk in the light. Another thing light does, it adds color to our surroundings. Do you ever notice as the darkness sets in, everything kind of takes on a grayish cast? You see, color comes from certain colors being reflected off of something. Without light, you can't have a reflection, so you don't have color. Spiritual light, the light of the world, adds color to our life. Do you ever think about that? The beauty, the color that's added when we have the light of the world. You see, without it, life is missing something. Light brings joy. Color and light affects attitudes. Hot colors generate hostility and conflict. Orange carpet could cause a lot of hot feelings. I know that from experience. Cool colors foster peace. I don't know if you noticed or not, but in the last 25 years, 25 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, church lights were dim. But then they came to be brighter and brighter. And now I guess they're dimming again in our present situation. But we use light in our churches to foster different attitudes. Darkness could cause depression. Did you know that the Christmas season is one of the greatest for depression and suicide? Darkness. It may not be caused by the absence of physical light, but in our hearts and our minds, the darkness causes depression and even suicide. Remember the song that we sing in church says he takes the gloom and fills the life with glory, And all is changed when Jesus comes to stay. He is the light. But in that last verse I read, the response to the light says, and the darkness comprehended it not. There are two meanings for that word, comprehend. One is understand, the other means to receive it. You see, night creatures like possums and different creatures that roam about at night, light's foreign to them. They don't get it. That's why our message of Christmas is not received and sometimes resented. I read a newspaper article several years ago that said only 1 of 3 Americans really understand, really know that Christmas is a time that we celebrate the birth of Christ. If our politically correct culture has its way, there'll be less in the future. Right now, I thank God for leadership that declares the meaning of Christmas. The Message says of that verse, the life light blazed out of the darkness, and the darkness couldn't put it out. Light and darkness can't coexist. I've already said, the minute you flip that light switch, darkness is gone. They can't be there together. Where does it go? It's gone. It's eradicated. When Jesus comes into our life, the darkness has to go. It doesn't take a great deal of light to make a difference. I remember living in Colorado Springs when I went to Bible college. One solitary light on top of Pikes Peak on the building that sits there shines. You can see it for miles and miles from every direction. One light. It can become a guiding light. Several months ago, I bought a little night light that we put in our hallway. It doesn't burn hardly any electricity, but at night it lights up the whole center part of the house where you can walk without walking in the darkness. I remember when we first started putting up Christmas trees, the lights on the tree burned quite a bit of electricity in the Christmas season, but now we've gone down to tiny little lights that burn almost nothing. 1 to 4 watts or even less than that. They're easy to see at night because of the contrast to darkness. I remember flying from Dallas, Texas to Chicago one time. The pilot came on the intercom and said, if you look out your left window, you can see the lights of Denver, Colorado. Now, if you look on the map, it's a long, long way from that path the airplane was taking to Denver, Colorado. But because in the darkness those lights shine, you can see them from a long distance. I guess the lesson that comes to that, you don't have to be a Billy Graham to make a difference in the world where you live. You can be a light in the darkness. All the darkness in the world can't put out the lights. I guess that brings me to thought. Light has a responsibility, and as lights in a dark world, we have a responsibility. Let's look at a couple of verses here before we go. In John 8, verse number 12, Jesus made the statement. I've already said that this was on the Festival of Lights or Hanukkah. Jesus stood up and said, I am the light of the world. John said in chapter 1, in him was light, and the life was the light of men. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. But if you go back to Matthew 5, verse 14, Jesus also said, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So is a light, a reflected light, of course. He's the light, we're the reflection. As a light, we have a responsibility. Look at one more verse with me from Matthew 5:16. You know this one probably by heart. Let your light so shine before men in such a way that they will see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. Notice that light and works are two different things here. Light is a dynamic behind the works. It's not enough just to let them see your good works. There has to be a motive. There has to be something within us that glows and shows. It's love. It's not just doing things like going to church once or twice or 3 times a week, or putting money in the offering plate, or not doing certain things. There's something within the light that shines from us. It's an inner thing, not an outer thing. They must see our passion and our relationship with Jesus Christ. It has to be His light shining through us or reflecting. That will illuminate the things we do, the reason behind them. So works, or the things we do, are the outworking, the expression of the light that shines within us. I hope this year, as you drive down the street and see all the lights, or even in your own home as the Christmas lights shine up, you'll think of that verse, and the light shone in darkness, and the darkness couldn't put it out. More and more in our culture today, we see the efforts to put the light out. So this is a message of hope for us, the lights of Christmas. I challenge us all to be lights of the world. A world that's gone crazy with the commercial side of the celebration. Let's be the lights of Christmas this year, the light of the world.